little bit today about the mechanism of letting go and how starting to cultivate kind of a neutrality within your own consciousness can really help to alleviate suffering and can really actually move you into a high vibrational state, whether you realize it or not. When we're really focused on that forcing, controlling kind of energy, we're residing in a very low vibrational state, and it becomes this mechanism of matter trying to change matter. And it's a very slow process, and it can be a very frustrating process. This is also the level of consciousness where we see greed, anger, frustration, guilt, shame, hatred, any of these really low vibrational thought forms or emotional states really prevent us from, reaching an enlightened state of thinking. But it also, in terms of manifesting our true desires or the life that we actually want, it really slows down the process. And I want to explain this a little bit. So essentially, it's when we let go of almost everything that we start to be really, really free. So let's kind of utilize an example here. Let's say that you really wanted to financially manifest a certain level. You really want to get to that $1 million mark, and that's all you think about, and you're just working super hard and you're fixated on that dollar amount or the money that you have to make, any of these kind of things. You're also creating within yourself this vortex of a lot of stress, essentially this compounding stress that you're layering on your consciousness because you have such a directed desire towards the accumulation of wealth. You feel that it's attached to your identity, that you won't be able to be happy with living and life until you've achieved this $1 million mark or whatever it is. And I'm using this as an example. But what happens when we exist in this way is that we become very attached to that particular outcome, and then we can get very frustrated. So we can be looking at our lives, looking at timelines, saying we haven't achieved what we want to achieve yet in our lives. And as we do this, and as we have this very static desire that we feel it must manifest for us to achieve any type of joy or happiness, which is essentially enlightenment, we're really putting ourselves actually into a very stagnant state, and we're really not helping the law of attraction or the law of creation, because we're pigeonholing ourselves to a certain outcome. Okay, another example would be, let's say you want to manifest a certain type of life partner, and you're really stuck on it being maybe a particular person. Maybe you get yourself over fixated on an end result with one particular person, and then again, it's the material world or a body, a human being trying to influence another human being, but really not being so not in your flow state. It's such a rigid desire that, again, you can really get yourself super frustrated by trying to make something happen with a particular person, okay? And that's where, again, you have to kind of let go. This whole process of manifestation is that learning to be okay with whatever is coming into your environment, and to really drop the stress, stop carrying the stress, stop carrying the worry. Again, when we're really laser focused towards a certain target, it can be a good thing to have goals. I'm not saying don't have goals, but when we're laser focused towards those goals in a way that is very rigid, it creates a very kind of almost choking stress that is all pervading in our lives, because we have sort of these blinders on and we don't often see other opportunities or other things. And we also, what we can do if we're really rigid about a certain outcome, we actually prevent it from happening in a way that is very mysterious and beautiful and gentle. Because again, nature and the quantum field, or the divine intelligence, its mechanism, or its way of moving through our life is a very gentle way. It's a very gentle, humble way. Now, there's times when that field will create a lot of change very rapidly, and that's not a bad thing. But it's really, this journey is one in which we have to soften our consciousness. We have to be able to be okay with not knowing the outcome, not knowing 10 steps ahead, and having and residing in a place of trust. Because remember, everything is vibration. Everything is energy and vibration and frequency in terms of the universe. And because we are a part of that energy, a part of that frequency, we need to be really cognizant about where we're sitting on the spectrum. And as we raise our vibration up, as we move towards enlightenment, what happens is an expansion. And this expansion of our consciousness and of our beingness will actually look like a loosening of our requirements of life. We will start to reside in a flow state where we are not expectant of anything. Because again, being super expectant or wanting a certain outcome, or being frustrated that life isn't giving us what we want when we want it, that's a very constrictive mindset, and it doesn't help us. I mean, it won't magnetize us towards getting those wonderful gifts that God and the universe have in store for us. It creates this lower vibrational resonance within our being, and the only thing that will be drawn into that lower vibrational resonance is a lot of stress, a lot of really hard battles, because that's what we're emanating. We're emanating that stress. So we have to get to a point where we loosen the reins on being so laser focused on specific outcomes, okay? Now, there's another layer to this, okay? That doesn't mean that essentially you open up the barn gates and let anybody come and steal your horses, because everything is just relaxed and who really cares what happens. That's not what I'm talking about. You still take really directed action each and every day of your life, but you do it with a different sense behind it. So you're doing what you think is the best, I guess, out expression of doership, but in a very gentle way. You're not expecting anything other than the fact that you're proud of your own hard work. And in the non-expectation, you're basically giving your faith, your trust to the universe. And as we move up that scale towards faith and trust, and have this sort of humble way about the out expression of our beingness, what is drawn towards us are really beautiful, incredible surprises that come effortlessly. So they are just going to start to manifest due to this high vibrational state. And again, when we are vibrating at a very high state, what does that look like? It's going to look like a very peaceful, calm, non-argumentative, non-expectant, relaxed human, that is emanating a tremendous amount of giving, that's emanating a tremendous amount of love and joy. You're going to tend to be less argumentative. You sort of go with the flow. Now, the other thing that we have to really look at when we are understanding how to move our consciousness up the scale towards unconditional love would be to look at what triggers us. So I know I've talked about triggers before, but in terms of really letting go and really getting into the flow state, this is something that we can utilize with what might actually be affecting us. Now, again, when we're triggered, we're essentially giving away our power, okay? We hold a certain amount of power within our being. And we're the most powerful when we are the most calm and peaceful, because again, we are holding that state of peace and grace inside of ourselves. When we lose our power is when we get triggered. So if the things that other people around us are doing become very frustrating and stressful, and it kind of takes us into this negative vortex, we really have to start to pay attention to what it is that triggered us and why did it trigger us? What was the why behind the trigger? So a lot of times it's going to be, certain insecurities, abandonment issues can be, one of the things that can trigger people. Things like, the ego wants attention. So if it's not getting a certain amount of attention and limelight, it can get triggered. Things, that can trigger us would be people that are maybe demanding too much of us, taking too much. We can get triggered by feeling overwhelmed by circumstances in life, and that can be a trigger. There's pretty much unlimited triggers. But if you find that you are getting triggered often, you definitely need to look at why that is. And usually it is because you're really pigeonholing yourself into a certain outcome, and you're very rigid in that. Because when you're in a flow state and when you're in a joyous, unconditionally loving flow state, it's really difficult to get triggered, because again, you're just happy with whatever you see around you. And even if, there's things around you that you don't deem the highest expression of others' behavior, or maybe what you want to, how you thought the day would plan or go in according to plan, or whatever it may be. When we're thinking in this way, when we are getting triggered in this way, we stop looking for the little miracles. And what I learned a long time ago, through my parents getting divorced and a lot of, just really kind of, back then I would have called them turbulent times in my life. What I actually realized was there was a tremendous amount of growth that happened from the chaos that was happening around me. And so looking back on that, it was absolutely tremendously a gift, but I didn't at that time see it as a gift. And had I been in more of a flow state, I would have realized that I'm integrating a ton of lessons, I'm building a lot of character, and just because, I'm not getting the perfect house or whatever it is, when I was 18 years old, or the things that I thought that I wanted, didn't mean that what was expressing itself at that time in my life wasn't actually lining me up for grander and grander manifestations. So now I've learned to trust the universe, because what I've realized is that anything that comes up in my life that's a little bit uncomfortable, or even a lot uncomfortable, has always seemed to prepare me for something that was upcoming that I really needed that skill. And so when we start to relax into this sort of trustful state and realize that, hey, if I had to run back to my house to get the keys, because I forgot them, I was running around and, didn't grab the keys to the cabin in the morning, whatever it was, I've started, and I've done this for many years, and really that's what I feel helped me in terms of my manifestation, was that I always saw what other people would see as a negative as a positive, and I got really good at turning it around. So if I left my keys and it took me a little bit longer to get to work, I'd be like, oh, that's just the universe protecting me. Maybe I would have ran a red light by accident, and I would have gotten in a car accident. I always try to see that, or express it through my own consciousness, that everything that's being done in any given period of the day is being done for my highest good. And even if I don't understand it, particularly at that time, I continually drop back into the understanding that it's for my greater good. And then I want to talk a little bit about allowing others to take your power away specifically. So if you feel triggered by anybody that's in your life, or if there's sort of a constant group of individuals or individual that has the capacity to trigger you, first of all, it's probably a really good idea to try to dissect why that individual is so triggering to you. Is there some sort of a mirroring effect about that person? Is it something about that person that maybe you need to make an adjustment within yourself because that energy actually resides in you and you're seeing the reflection of it? Or are you just, again, really dropping down into that lower vibrational state of ego? And of course, ego is that part of us that really likes to control. Ego is always going to want to know every part, the outcomes, and be really rigid in its thinking. And when it deals with others, again, it's usually fairly abrasive, right? We've all heard the term pride goeth before the fall. That's the ego. The ego's always going to puff itself up and be kind of a pain in the ass, and it will cause us to be triggered. So again, really realizing that we do not want to give our power away to others. We don't want others to have that control over us, that they could trigger us into a state where we're not happy, where we're essentially lowering our vibration. We're not drawing and magnetizing the things we want for our lives towards us. And again, don't blame that other person. Like if you're triggered by them, you can't really blame them for that. But you definitely, if you feel like a certain individual does tend to trigger you a lot, it is probably better for you to move away from a lot of dealings with that person until you can really heal that part within yourself. And so let's talk about how we can heal some of these triggers. First of all, affirmations are really huge. So it takes about 21 to 30 days to change parts of your subconscious. So listening to subliminals, listening to affirmations daily or a couple times daily is a great way to gently affect the subconscious mind. I've done it several different times in my life when I've gone through stressful periods of time where I just do quiet meditations, self-hypnosis, and again, affirmations, because it just makes you feel good to hear really amazing words about yourself. And when you start to lift your vibration in this way, you tend to get triggered a lot less. Then there is the element of practice. So if you want to get good at anything, well, face your fears. So go into environments and be around people that tend to trigger you, okay, instead of running away. Because when we run away, we give that other person the power over us. So put yourself in situations where you would traditionally get triggered and really work on softening your energy and not responding to the things that would normally trigger your ego. And as you practice this more and more and more, you'll find that you become a very solid, peaceful, grounded person. Now, of course, there's still going to be things that crop up that will frustrate you and will essentially piss you off. But the more that we work on it, again, the more we're able to go into any environment without being triggered, okay? And this is what the whole mechanism of letting go is, okay? A lot of people say, let go and let God. That's one of my favorite sayings to myself, is just, trust in the divine plan, trust that everything is always working out. And if you do, again, tend to get a little bit stressed or triggered, to remind yourself, to allow yourself to be in it, because we can't all be, monks meditating all day long. But if we're constantly reminding ourselves of the fact that we want to move towards this state of joy and peace and harmony within ourselves, and we're constantly working on the things that trigger us, we're going to be moving, whether we like it or not, up into the higher levels of consciousness. And that's what it's all about. That's what our journey here to planet Earth is all about. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. And hopefully you're going to have a very trigger-free weekend, blissful weekend. And again, thanks for joining me with Inspire Me 360.